So, we're recording. So, I'm going to hand over to Amy for the first session, which is about open space and open knowledge, etc.
So it's about open source, open knowledge, and fostering the commons. And it's not really a presentation; it's more of a discussion. Basically, I wanted to hone into this topic because a lot of people are being driven online because of the pandemic that normally maybe may not be spending so much time online. So when Rakesh asked, is everyone familiar with Zoom? Everyone here was familiar with Zoom, but maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, that wasn't correct. And this is really interesting because people are now having to make choices around which technological tools to use. And also why they're using them and who makes those choices and how much thinking is behind these choices that goes behind. So it's really, I would like to pose this question to you. So for example, I am aware that Rakesh chose Zoom for this session, and I would like to ask him his reasons for this.
Okay, so obviously I've been using open source applications. I've been on Linux. I used to be a Unix systems administrator from the 80s, 90s. So I've seen the whole open source applications, etc., evolve over that time. I've been a great advocate of open source. The applications, though, that I've seen for this, there's been some really great applications out there. However, in terms of functionality, many of them, especially with the kind of video technology, are not as smooth as Zoom. Initially, I don't know if people remember, but maybe up to about 4, maybe 5 years ago, Zoom didn't have a Linux or Unix version. So for many years, even though I saw many people using it and speaking very highly of it, it was not available to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the main reason for choosing Zoom was because of its functionality and the fact that many people do now know how to use it. Personally, I would prefer to, use something like Jitsi or any of those applications. Everyone I've spoken to who's used Jitsi in the last few months have said it has become terrible. They've abandoned meetings. They've wasted 15, 20 minutes trying to make it work, having to abandon it, and then eventually go over to Zoom. So, but I'm sorry. I still do not work with things like Skype, though. I absolutely am adamant I will never use Skype again.
You make some really good points here. So I didn't want to put you on the spot or attack you in any way. I'm just, as a user, like it's an exploration for me, because also for the people on this call, because we make these choices all the time. So when I organize my sessions, for example, the one that I ran yesterday was also on Zoom, and I had the same reasons like you. And this is interesting to explore and also to find ways in which we can make different choices and to support the open source community, to find ways to support the open source community to make better products so that these reasons go away. And what's interesting to me is that it is like being somehow in the supermarket when we have to make a choice out of convenience because for 100 reasons, and all these reasons are right and justified. And sometimes I wonder, and this is a good question to the people here, how many of you have wondered about, for example, walking away from WhatsApp or something that you use every day and maybe switching to something different. But the real question is, if you want to choose something different, would you even know where to go? So if you can indicate on the chat yes or no, or do you have an idea where you would look for alternatives? Oh, so that's good. Yeah. So I would like to share some resources with you with how and where to find alternatives. And so I'll share my screen for a moment. And this could be something that maybe you can use also for other things. Share that. So here's one website that could really help you find alternatives for almost anything these days. So let's say if I type here alternative to WhatsApp, and I click, yeah, it gives me WhatsApp there. And here I can choose what platforms I want to use. So if I scroll down slightly, I can pick Linux or Windows, whatever you're using. And here under license, I can pick open source. And it will give me different alternatives to WhatsApp that are pretty popular. The top one at the moment is Signal. Lots of people are switching to Signal. I find this also very good. You can also see some reviews here, which really helps you make the decisions you need to make. But it's not only for communication. So if I put here Photoshop, same process like before. I can scroll down. Here I pick open source. And basically these are all the open source alternatives. It's such a really cool website. It's called alternative2.net. A really good start for people who want to switch away from the, let's say, more corporate approach to technology and maybe more ethical choices. Also, this is a great way to support the open source crowd, let's say, because by using their software and by giving feedback, you are taking away the custom from the other more corporate companies who are using your data to basically sell it for developing more adverts to sell you stuff, or even just blatantly selling it to other people. So my question is then here, if you really want to understand what's behind the open source philosophy, then you can also look at the principles on opensource.com. There are principles of the open source way, and they cover the main core principles of why open source is important. And I think here there is a really big overlap with what we do in permaculture and permaculture principles. For example, that there's a collaborative approach, that there is room for discovery and edge and meritocracy, where we honor our teachers and previous knowledge that come before us, but also forming communities, that there is an ability to use other people's work, build on top of it to continue improving it. This is not the case for the other proprietary software, where it's a closed box and you cannot really look into this. So by making the choice to switch from, let's say, WhatsApp to Signal, then you are supporting this movement and you are living the permaculture way in a way that it is in your everyday choice. I think it's pretty interesting. I also find this very challenging. So I'm still, let's say, transitioning, and there is no right or wrong way for making these choices. Sometimes you have to make choices which are conflicting also with your ideals. And this is fine, because this is part of the process. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a process and not something that you start at or finish. It is like a continuous evolution of this, let's say, consumer choices that we do every day. There are also some interesting developments that I'm seeing now that were not available before. So for example, if we will go on the first website here, the alternative to, when we put Google Drive, which is another very popular service that Google is offering. And I go to alternatives and put open source, I will get here Nextcloud. Now, anyone will tell you that Nextcloud, to do by yourself, this is extremely difficult. If you're not a technological person, to launch an instance of Nextcloud is not possible. But actually, the Permaculture Association in Britain are offering Nextcloud as a service. And anyone can try it. It's cost €2 per month per user account for some storage. And they're doing this as pilot project. So they want to test how many permaculture people are interested in these ethical services. And this will be like the next step of, okay, how we foster these commons and how we can step into more ethical practices by enabling, by the Permaculture Association in this case, enabling the promotion and use of these ethical services. Not only this, the Nextcloud instance that the Permaculture Association is using is hosted on a repurposed server, which is made from recycled materials, and also with clean energy. So not only you're taking away your custom from these big companies, but you're also supporting the Permaculture Association to continue offering these great services. I think it's a really interesting progression from a few years ago when you really had no real alternatives. If you have no money, this is a different topic. So for example, I know some communities really have zero money to work with and therefore have to go with the free version that Google offers. And again, this is a transition thing. So I wouldn't blame anyone for using Google Drive. You know, if they can't afford it, so be it, they can't afford it. It's also pretty limited in storage. So we really need to think and challenge ourselves as to what are we putting on this and how much, how large these are. And for example, recordings such as this one, what we're doing now, it will be quite a large recording. And especially when meetings are long, then the video and so on can be pretty large. But there are other ways. And I've seen, for example, people who switch to Nextcloud instead of using, let's say, open office documents, which are pretty big also, compared to text files, switching to text files. So when you can actually strip it bare and go to the very basics and say, this is also less harm to the environment because I'm using less electricity. And also you don't use so much space. And the same drive is also going through the open source community at the moment and in the hacker scene to reduce websites' large sizes, because in the recent years, the sizes of the websites and the sizes of our communication have increased exponentially. And this is not sustainable. And so now we are seeing back, for example, there was a fantastic website the other day that I saw that runs on solar energy. And when there is no solar energy, the website is not up. It just comes with a message saying, this is a solar powered website, come back when it's sunny. And it's fantastic. And you can have a little text file basically attached there on the offline version, and people can download this offline text file, and that's it. And the next thing I want to point out is we don't want to have this tragedy of the commons, you know, the negative narrative that, oh, if you leave something for free, then people will vandalize it. In the open source community, this is not right. The more you use it and the more you support it, then the better it becomes and the more it grows. And we really have to think about this technology, how it impacts the world around us, the use of electricity and, let's say, pollution, because there's a lot of pollution out there in terms of data. And yeah, I think we also think about regulation, because now lots of people are hosting for other people. Let's say this Nextcloud server offered by the Permaculture Association is an interesting resource that maybe was not there before. And if you're interested in these topics and to collaborate further, there is the International Permaculture Hub, which I'm also part of. They have a digital circle, which is right here. We have a Slack channel, and basically they try and take permaculture into the world from an ethical tech perspective. It's a bunch of freelancers that work on this. We're interested to bridge the gap between permaculturists and people interested in permaculture with technology. And so we would be very happy to have your input on any of these topics. So let's continue fostering the commons. Let's push for open source. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, wonderful. So we still have 7 minutes. So are there any questions anyone has?
I wonder if people have experience with those different devices, or you know, things and say, yeah, this works or this doesn't work. Oh, please, I like to hear.
Yeah, Nextcloud is nice. I installed it on my server. Unfortunately, because I was storing files and things, my service provider basically said, no, sorry, you can't do that. You need to take those things off, even though it's an application and I could install the application. So I had some technical reasons as to why I couldn't actually use it on the server that I actually pay for. And as an application, it's for storing data, it's really nice, but it also has some nice little extra tools that you can plug in about, like Doodle and, so yes, there's various things that it also has, which they're functional. They're good enough. So
it's very similar to Google Drive these days. So it has a lot of apps that you can install. It has a Kanban, it has a polling. So if you're in a group and you want to make a poll, you can do that. It has co-spending, so you can have shared budgets. It's a pretty nice community tool, I think. And this Kanban board is also pretty cool. I use it. It has an inbuilt calendar in it. So I have stopped using Google Calendar and have started using this instead. I find it also pretty good. Yeah, I mean, the functions in it are always improving. And of course, the more people use it, the more the developers are encouraged to develop it further. And this is, yeah, I think sometimes you have to live with it when it's a little clunky, because remember, this is open source. And I think it's really a beautiful moment when you're able to feedback something to them and saying either this is great, or actually here I had a clunky bit and could you maybe look at it. And when you meet the Nextcloud people I meet them at the hacker conferences and so on, they're always so happy with feedback and that more and more people are using the applications.
Yeah, I think it's also useful to point out, there's a difference between free applications and open source. Does someone want to speak into that? Because it is a very significant difference.
Yeah, so free as in free beer, as in free that you don't pay for.
Yeah, as in like Lumio is a really good example.
Yes. And then there is freemium, so it's free for some basics, but not completely free for advanced things, like Lumio also. Lumio fits this model. And then there is free as in free software, meaning it's open source. So this is different than free as in free beer. So Nextcloud is not, it could be free as in free beer, but for charity organizations, if I'm not mistaken. But then when it comes to hosting it on a large scale, that you have to pay. And this is why the Permaculture Association is charging this fee, because they have to pay for this service. So that's the difference. But you can also, on alternative too, on the website, you could also look at free as in free beer or open source.
So I'm absolutely certain when I looked at it, which is probably about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, it was completely free and I could install it on my server completely free of charge.
Installing it, yes, but for loading stuff on it, like your server, you still have to pay for that.
I had to pay for my server, correct?
Yes, that's right. So that's it. But it is, if you self-host it, it's free.
Exactly, yes.
As in free beer. And it can also be decentralized. So if you set up with your friends some decentralized server system, it was also possible to do decentralized. But this is more complicated, and maybe not every user could do that.
Okay, wonderful. Any other applications, open source or free applications that people have used, or is there something that you're really desperate to get off of that maybe one of us have an alternative already to? So an application that you're still using. I'll be honest, the only application that I use that is not free or open source or whatever is, which is not also for Linux, is SketchUp, because I've never made a Unix version of SketchUp. Apart from that, everything else I can do pretty much using either open source or free applications. Is there anything anyone would like some advice on? Zoe?
Facebook.
Oh yeah, yes,
I
there
really
are.
I hate Facebook, but the only thing why I keep, like, why I also love it in a way is because the big network of people, and you can reach out to so many people across the whole world. But then the whole company behind it is like a disaster.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lots of companies have come and gone, set up something, tried something, but it's never really taken off as far as I know. I don't know of one that has lasted. Does anyone else know?
The Mastodon network is going still pretty well with the activists that I know of. So in my activist circles, there's a lot of people on Mastodon, and also the other one now I don't.
How do you spell that?
Mastodon. Wait.
Mastodon.
I don't know why they called it like an animal that's extinct. I think that's a bad omen for a company, to be honest. But it's a pretty interesting app, and I think actually what really needs to happen is that people start making the change and dragging other people with them. So to say, oh, you know, look at this great app and so on. There are also alternatives to Twitter, and yeah, I think it's really difficult to break up with Facebook. I'm still on Facebook despite all of my activist movements and will go on public speaking. And for years I had come off Facebook, and recently during this pandemic I came back to Facebook because I was homesick and I missed my friends so much. So normally it was fine with my busy life, but somehow this has touched me in this way and I had to come back to Facebook. At least that's how I felt.
Okay.
But there are other places.
Great. So it's past. So thank you very, very, very much, Amy, for that wonderful exploration into the whole world of open source and how to, yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to talk about propagation and plants and stuff like that. So I know Sophie's internet isn't so good, so she's asked me if I would share my screen for her presentation. So just let me know when you want me to start.
Yeah, thanks, Rakesh. Yeah, you can start now with the first slide.
Okay. Oh, view only. I can't actually show it as an actual presentation.
Let's just check your privileges. Anyone can view, change.
Here we go. It's okay. I found it.
It's okay?
Yep. So give me a second and I'll start sharing. Share screen. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Cool. Can you hear me as well? Okay.
Yes.
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 Okay, nice. So yeah, going from open source technology to open source plants. This is, yeah, maybe a simpler tool, but yeah, it's also very powerful. We can go to the second slide. So yeah, there's a lot of questions coming up, which is why I decided to speak about this in different events when we talk about permaculture design, forest gardening, just generally starting a garden. You know, where will I get all these plants? Is it expensive? What are all these special permaculture plants that people are speaking about? And yeah, this is the open sourcing, that all plants produce a surplus, and rather than having to buy all the plants or buy all the different number of the plants that you would eventually need for your design, there's some very simple techniques and strategies so that you can create your own plants. So yeah, you can start by finding them in so many different places. A lot of plants that we consider useful in permaculture systems and not some kind of special different set of plants. They might be things that we're not familiar with, but a lot of them are like can be wild plants, can be plants that are naturalized in different places. So you'd be surprised actually where you can find really useful plants for your design or for your garden system. So yeah, you can walk around to so many places. It's a really nice kind of mindset to have when you're taking a walk, to think about, you know, not just observing the plants around you, but thinking, you know, could I snip a bit off of this? Oh, this person's got this in their garden. Can I take a bit of this? And yeah, with an idea of no matter kind of what space you have, you can create your own nursery or propagation station. Next slide. So we have a place here that's like a hectare, so like 2.5 acres, and it was an empty field when we first began. And now, yeah, there are a lot of plants there and a lot of layers and diversity of plants. And yeah, maybe about 20% of those we've bought, and the rest we have made ourselves in different ways. You can go to the next one. So yeah, when you think about starting your plant nursery, what you want to think about is creating some kind of microclimate, some kind of niche where the plants are going to be happy. So if you think about how plants reproduce in nature, they're usually coming up next to a parent plant. So you have seeds being dropped under trees, you have shoots of plants coming off at the side. So you want to create like a quite sheltered place. So you've got some shade, you've got some humidity. So there are just some different examples here about how you can set up a nursery. So I've got like cuttings in a bed with drip irrigation. There are also different rooted cuttings here, just in plastic bottles. Can go to the next one. So yeah, really you don't need anything special. You don't need any special equipment. You can start like very simply. Here we've got like tops of plastic bottles being used as incubators to keep the humidity into some cuttings here. Yeah, from apples. Can go to the next one. Yeah, here you can see like we've like a little shady niche to protect the plants. You can use a polytunnel or a covered space. Next. You can create again a microclimate under a tree. You can use hoops, different protection things to create an ideal climate. And next. And yeah, lastly, you can even start on your windowsill. So yeah, like especially in these times when a lot of people are at home, are not having so much connection with nature, with the outside, it's actually a really nice way to start preparing for the future. Maybe you can have access to land in the future, access to a community land project. You can create plants that you can gift to people, that you can swap. So even with just a windowsill and some attention and some light, you can create, the beginnings of a whole forest garden. Next. Okay, so here are the main kinds of plants grouped for the way in which they're typically propagated. Excuse me. So I'm not going to go into detail in all of these. I'm just going to give like a overview. But yeah, so you can see that some types, there's a lot more diversity in how you can reproduce them. So trees, you've got grafting, which, I would speak more in detail about at another time if there's interest, but that's basically where you take the root of one kind of tree, usually a wild tree with strong growing root system, and you join in a number of different ways a particular kind of usually fruit tree that you want on the top of a known kind, so you replicate the characteristics. Cuttings, layering, seeds, and suckers. So yeah, cuttings is where you're taking parts of the upper parts of a plant and you're rooting them. I'll go into all of this in a bit more detail. Layering is where you're mimicking the function where some plants let their branches trail or their stems to the ground and put out roots. Seeds, we know about planting seeds usually, and suckers is where from the roots at the side are coming shoots that you can divide. So that's with trees, with shrubs and climbing plants. You can see you can do most of the same. With perennial herbaceous, you can replicate them with seeds, cuttings, and division. With bulbs, with division and seeds. Cacti, with cutting, seeds, and division. And with annual and biennial herbaceous plants, mainly with seeds. So yeah, the more kind of long-living plants, even though most of them you can replicate with seeds, you know, you can start a seed in the ground and have a small plant, but at the same time, you can have a much faster result from taking a cutting or a division. And also depending on the kind of plant, you can be more sure of what the result will be. Can go to the next one. Okay, so yeah, in general, when you're going to collect seeds, you want to have fully ripe seeds from a healthy plant. So you want to pick quite carefully what genetic material you're taking to continue with in your system. A lot of plants will produce a lot of seed because that's their mechanism for continuing their genetic line. Not all of it will be viable seed, not all of it will be healthy seeds, so you want seed depending on the plant and processes which replicate the natural conditions of germination of the plants. So you've got like scarification, which is where there's some scratching or damage to the shell of the seed, which replicates how it might be damaged by animals or by natural processes before it germinates. And then you've got stratification, which would replicate the process between the seed falling, staying over a winter, so a cold stratification, or some plants which will germinate after a fire, so a hot stratification. So that's replicated by either keeping them in a cold place, planting them at the correct time, soaking them in hot water. At the end, I'm gonna just give some resources that are also useful to find out more in detail about all these processes and how they relate to specific plants. The next one. Okay, so rooting, cutting, really nice one because it's very easy to do. This time of year is also good. Like I said, when you're walking around, you can take a knife and you can cut pieces in them or upsetting anyone. Of course, you can ask people if it's in their garden. It's a nice way to start. You're taking a cutting. You're having a vegetative reproduction of that plant. And basically from a small piece of the plant, it's regenerating all the information of the entire plant and it's creating a clone, which is has the same genetic material as the mother plant. So it sounds a bit weird, like you're cloning. Is that something like doing a hybrid or something strange? But it's just a natural process where you're, rather than having the reproduction, the offspring, which has a mixed genetic material. So like with a fruit tree, if you're taking a seed from the fruit, it's got the information of the mother tree and also of the pollinating tree. So it might not be the same fruit as the tree you've taken the fruit you've taken the seed from. Whereas with the cutting, it's going to be true to the mother plant. So some basic rules of thumb is you want to have a clean cut, and you want to have well-drained soil for putting the cutting in, and you want to have a good level of humidity. The next one. Okay, so yeah, for the cuttings, there's 3 main kinds. You've got a softwood cutting, which is taken from the new fresh shoots that come in early spring. And you usually cut that across the union of the old and the new wood. And the length of that wants to be between 5 and 8 centimeters. They're sometimes hard to take because they're very soft and they can easily dry out. Some easier ones to take, which is coming to the time, are semi-ripe. So that's when these new shoots become firmer and more sturdy. So they're taken from midsummer to autumn, and there you cut straight above a node. So a node is where you have the leaves coming off at the side, and there's certain hormones that are there. So when you cut around the node, it helps to create roots at that place. So those should be between 10 and 15 centimeters in length, and usually you reduce the leaves so you don't have too much evaporation and loss of moisture from the plant material. And then the last one is a hardwood cutting. So these are longer lengths when you've got the mature stems. So after they've already hardened, and you can take this like in the late autumn or through the winter. So the leaves have come off and they haven't started growing again in the spring. They take longer to root, but you can take a lot of them and leave them. They're quite low, kind of labor intensive. So there you cut just above a bud and they'd be longer, about 30 centimeters. And the next one. Yeah, so here you can just see visually like the kind of cuttings, the different kinds. And then the next one. Division. Okay, so division is another really easy one to do. Most people who've got a garden will have a lot of plants that will easily grow. So you can see here on the left, Melissa, this is lemon balm. This really is a epically growing plant that's very easy to take pieces and to regrow them. In the middle is daylily. Now it's just come up, and that's again a clumping plant, and that's really easy to divide. And on the right is a wild garlic, which is a bulb, and again it makes new bulblets on the side, and you can divide it in that way. And the next one. Yeah, so here you can just see visually some of the process. Again, it's very simple. And very interesting because, yeah, when you start digging plants up to divide them, and through all of these processes, it's kind of like a way of getting to know them better. Because one of the questions a lot of people have is, you know, like, how can I start a garden when I don't have so much plant knowledge? And you could say, okay, you should go and study your plants until you know enough to work with them. But you can also work the other way. You know, once you start working with plants and the plants that you find around you that are easy to access, you start to learn about them through observation, through observing the roots, how the shoots are coming up, what the seeds look like. And in that way, actually, you can experience some botanical processes and start to have like a closer relationship with your plants. The next one, gonna just go through these quickly because the time's gonna run out. Okay, so this is layering. As it's naturally occurring, you've got trailing plants, which where they're touching the ground, they're putting out roots. This is often happening also on blackberries, loganberries. You can see on the next slide. Oh, one before, yeah. So here on the right, it's not very clear. I'll answer this in the end. So here is a pot. This is a loganberry, which is a very prolific plant. It's a cross between a raspberry and a blackberry.
Sophie, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. And yeah, you can see there we've put the tip roots. So that's another nice way that you can make new plants from this, or just to let them root in the ground and then dig them up. And the last slide. This is a really useful book, which, yeah, I recommend. It's got a lot of photos, it's got a lot of practical advice. And yeah, so those are kind of rules of thumb. And then of course, it depends. So there are like different rules and different details, but hopefully that gives you just an idea of how easy it is to create your plants and to inspire people maybe who haven't tried to start. So shall I just answer this question? So what time to divide the wild garlic? So basically you want to do it usually when the upper parts have died down. So now it's coming up and flowering, and then it will be dying down. And yeah, probably around the autumn time is good to divide it. So yeah, that's all, unless there are any other questions. Thank you. You can stop the presentation, Rakesh, so you can be unmuted.